Welcome to DLA Dialogues, From Factory to Foxhole, the podcast where we dive into the heart of DLA's mission and mindset. I'm your host, Jake Boyer. Today we're discussing a significant event, the September 2024 pager attacks in Lebanon. This event has major implications for both supply chain security and contested logistics. Joining me to talk through what happened and why it matters is Peter Battaglia, DLA's Deputy Director for Mission Assurance. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Glad to have you here. Let's start with the basics. What happened with these attacks in September 2024?
So many people might remember that in September 2024, there's breaking news about pagers exploding in people's pockets and all throughout Israel, that entire region. What had happened is that Israel had actually mounted an attack against the supply chain and used a couple of common mission assurance type items in order to basically make them use a certain item and then use that against them. And so, first off, you need to understand the situation. Israel and Hezbollah, clearly they don't like each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so Israel took several years in order to set up false companies, utilize actually legitimate pagers, insert the explosives, and sell them to Hezbollah. Now, you might be wondering, why does Hezbollah need pagers? Well, there's a concept in mission assurance called PACE. It's primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency or exigency. And really, the way that you can kind of think about that is you use your cell phone, but if that goes out, maybe you use your home phone. And if that goes out as well, maybe you have to go to a payphone. Although good luck finding a payphone here in the world today.
Isn't that kind of like a carrier pigeon?
Yes, that could be your your exigent circumstances. So Hezbollah had been using their cell phone networks in order to communicate. Israel had, over the course of several years, penetrated that through cyber attacks, listening, all of the great things that we see in the movies. Mm-hmm. And so Hezbollah eventually found out, started having some of their operations, their operatives arrested. And so they were driven off of the cell phone network onto the pager network. And so they were going from their primary communication to their alternate, progressing down pace. Israel had known what their PACE plan was. And so as part of this large coordinated attack, they had set up basically a false supplier of pagers that would eventually explode on them.
Fascinating. So this clearly wasn't the first time Hezbollah faced communications challenges, but this was on a completely different level.
Indeed. Basically, this was not only a result of many years of effort in terms of gathering the intelligence, but also years of effort in order to set everything up. They had to set up the false supplier. They had to set up getting the actual pagers, figuring out how to insert the explosives. Then they had to set up a false company, set up false distribution networks, and be able to actually get that shipping data and information. This was a culmination of years' worth of effort in order to make this attack.
Okay, you've described what Israel did to set up this pager operation. Mm-hmm. But if I'm Hezbollah, there's not just one pager company in the entire world. How does Hezbollah go from, hey, I can't do my cell phone anymore, now I need a pager, to buying pagers from the specific company that Israel wants them to buy them from?
So, excellent point. And Hezbollah, just like any major corporation or company, even DLA, not only do they have to buy all of the goods and services, but they're actually operating on a limited budget because they want to maximize their efficiency. So one of the things that people can take advantage of is that efficiency, because if you buy in bulk, you'll get a discount.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you look at the pager industry, it's like you said, there's still pagers around, but it's a contracting market. And so if you're able to stand up a distributor or a reseller of pagers, there's only so many places that they can go, including your shop. And then if you give them a quantity discount, they're likely to buy from you. And so they were able to arrange all of that in terms of using the declining marketplace or the declining participation in the marketplace along with quantity discounts, because I hate to say it, Israel didn't really concern themselves with as much how much this operation was going to cost as opposed to Hezbollah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really opened the door both for them to start selling the pagers as kind of a now trusted agent.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because even as they were decreasing, Hezbollah was decreasing and going down their place plan, basically concentrating all of their communication efforts into a single pole. That although that increased their risk, they weren't actually looking into the supply chain. There were several red flags that I'm sure that you've seen on 60 Minutes as well as other areas. You know, apparently the entire operation, their distribution center, was probably no bigger than this entire studio, and yet they were supposedly recording sales of millions of pagers a month and whatnot. So had someone actually gone to the site, they would have seen that it's an apartment about this size and probably started asking questions before they just accepted.
What can DLA take away from this?
So there's several aspects of this that DLA can take away. One, of course, is information security. When we are going through things, developing DLA's PACE plan, developing our concept of operations, it's really important for us to control who has access to that. Now, all of DLA needs to know, but all DLA employees also need to be aware that they shouldn't be putting it on their Facebook accounts, on their Twitter feeds, a little bit of basic operational security there, what we call OPSEC, info security as well. So not only do we need to control that, because otherwise people could potentially use that against us, but we also need to be making sure that when we are identifying potential risks, such as, hey, we're only going to use this system, or we're going to standardize on whatever it might be. I don't know. Say that we all want to eat chicken for lunch or something along those lines, right? When you start to concentrate, you really need to analyze that risk and understand what does that do to your operations. How do you check that supply chain? And so there's a few different aspects here. Some things that DLA is already doing, as well as some things that we're trying to do. The first, of course, is making sure that we don't have counterfeit or suspect parts in the supply chain. And so our tech quality branch is actually working with the MSCs in order to have counterfeit testing. And so that's where when suspect parts are identified, they can be sent into a lab, tested, and made sure that they're the proper thing. For really critical items, of course, we have the first article testing. We have, all of the various qualifiers, including where if the company is, say, American or foreign-owned, foreign-controlled, so that we have that information security. So those are kind of things that, one, we're kind of doing right now. We're making sure that, as suspect things are identified, we're testing them out, we're validating them. For supercritical parts, we're testing them before we even accept them. And then also, we've kind of been doing that generic check, just kind of a generic background search, quick Google search, if you will. Where we're trying to go into the future, though, is really understanding the supply chain environment. And that's not only going to vetting who we are contracting with, but vetting their suppliers as well. In theory, all the way down to raw materials. Now that gets tricky because you can imagine, actually I teach supply chain risk management for joint logistics course in the Army, joint. But one of the examples that I use is a tennis ball.
Okay.
And so a tennis ball, you think about it, it's a very simple object, right? It's actually got 11 components.
Okay.
It's sourced from 11 different countries on 4 continents before it's actually assembled into a tennis ball. So the complexities of a tennis ball is what I teach because no one ever thinks that that's a complex item to make. Whereas if you start talking about your truck, a plane, of course there's a million parts on there, and of course it's going to be sourced globally. So one of the things that we need to do is understand where those are coming from. Because say that you're dependent on an adversarial country for something. If you get into conflict with them, are they going to be willingly providing that to you in order for you to fight against them? So when you were looking at something like the F-35, the F-18, any of those major weapon platforms, the Abrams tanks, all of that, it's critical for us to understand where are those supplies coming from? Are they from trusted sources? What material sources are trusted?
Gotcha. So speaking of that, you said all the way down to raw materials. Can you connect the dots for us for, if you're looking all the way down there, how does this tie into DLA strategic materials, managing the Defense National Stockpile, et cetera, et cetera?
Excellent question. So there's a couple of different things here. First is DLA needs to understand the supply chain. And so historically, we've been using a program called Warstopper in order to do basically the manual research into that. My office is partnering with them, using their requirements on information gathering in order to help develop a Center for CDAO. I always forget what the actual acronym is, but OSD CDAO is developing SCREEN, Supply Chain Risk Evaluation Environment.
Okay.
And so we're partnering up in order to be able to obtain that commercial and government data to be able to map those supply chains, figure out who's in the supply chain, where things are being sourced from. And so, one, we need to understand that. But then two, what Warstopper really does is it enables that intermediate and final part kind of semi-storage. But going beyond there, right, how do we actually get into the raw materials and what's used to create many different things? And that's where the National Defense Stockpile comes in. And although it's housed in DLA, it's not controlled by DLA. But their purpose is to effectively have those raw materials available to the United States, not just the Department of Defense, but all of commerce, in order to make sure that in times of conflict or in times of great need, we have material availability. So it's almost like a buffer stock. So we have buffer of raw material at the National Defense Stockpile. We have a buffer of intermediate and final product within Warstopper. And then, of course, we have our final product inventory in DLA. And so between those three things, what we're aiming at is ensuring the readiness and effectiveness of the warfighter.
If you could give one piece of advice to DLA leaders and logisticians about supply chain security and supply chain risk management, what would it be?
I think what actually I would do is probably refer back to the recent GAO report on foreign ownership, control, and influence. And basically what they did is they did an investigation into DOD on how we are identifying who we are sourcing from, both suppliers as well as source of raw materials. And they explored the different systems, including SCREEN that I spoke about. And really the ultimate recommendation is, one, to be asking the questions.
Mm-hmm.
To be asking, who are we getting this from? Where are we sourcing? How are we making sure that it's secure? And so really by focusing on those questions, asking the question, almost going back to, the original fight against terror. If you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
Asking those questions. And then, of course, you need the capability to answer those questions. So if I was to say as senior leaders, one, ask the question, but then two, make sure that people have the capabilities and the resources in order to answer those questions for you.
Well, this has been a very eye-opening conversation today, Peter. Thanks for sharing what you know and giving us some actual advice for DLA to go forward as we continue to try to answer the challenges of contested logistics and scrim and everything else. But we're going to finish with a little bit about you.
Oh.
This is the lightning round. Don't be nervous.
Huh?
First off, what's your superpower? What are you good at?
I'd probably describe my superpower as being a knowledge T, being able to take disparate information and tie it together into some sort of coherent story. You want a lot of knowledge across a broad base with in-depth knowledge in a specific area.
Okay.
And so you form the letter T.
Gotcha.
So you want
That's
to
what the T
become
is.
Mr. T in knowledge.
On the other hand, we always need to be learning. And to learn, you have to know where your weaknesses are. What's your kryptonite?
Easily one of my kryptonites is diving way too much into the details and chasing the squirrels as it is going through. So maintaining that discipline and focus in terms of what are we trying to accomplish as opposed to following every possible lead to see where it ends.
So one last question, and this is because we want to share as much knowledge as we can across the campaign of learning. It can be a book, it can be a podcast, it can be a movie. What's the last good thing you ingested that's speaking to the things we're looking at here?
So actually, I was reading about Apollo 13. So Apollo 13 is a fascinating story if people for some reason don't know about it, but events happened on the launch on the way to the moon that caused them to run fully through their pace plan, going through how are they going to survive and working together in order to overcome adversity. And really it's that teamwork approach, being able to get into all sorts of creative thinking. I think that's what's really needed within our government workers today.
Peter, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Again, it's been an honor and a privilege.
For DLA Dialogues, this is Jake Boyer. Until next time, remember that learning is a superpower. Use it wisely.